All right. So just as a disclaimer, I am recording this lecture and transcribing it as well. So let's not say anything crazy. I know how we can get a little bit crazy in forensics. Let's see here. 13 people. Wow, pretty good. 14 people. Maybe we should always have a virtual lecture. No, I'm kidding. We can't do that. Gino, you agree? Really? Thanks. Let's see here. 14 people. Let's see who's not here. Oh, we lost Sydney. What happened? Would save me gas. It would save me gas too, April. It's too bad it's not up to me. Okay, so 14 means 13. That means we're still missing 3 people. I'll give them a couple more minutes. Let's see here. Let's see here. Dallas is far. I used to work in Dallas. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just request these people to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Can't say I didn't try, you know what I mean? I think they're declining. Maybe they are declining. Okay, we got 15 people in here now. Let's see here. You just said, April says, I'm living. Okay, April says, I live in the high five. Where's that at? When I is trying to join, but is having trouble. Oh, wow. Yeah, I only worked as far as the Dallas County Crime Lab, so that would be on, what is it called? North Freeway, Northwest Freeway, Northeast Freeway, something like that. Also known as John C. Stemmons, or something like that, Stemmons Freeway. I guess I should turn off my phone. All right, let's see here. Okay, so um, I'm close to Plano, and so oh my God, Plano is so far. I used to drive up there all the time to go to. There's a Lego store up there on Independence called Rick's and Minifigs. I used to go up there all the time, and it would take like an hour to get there from where I am. It's crazy. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So just so you know, since we're having lecture today, we're going to do the. Oh, first, just since a lot more people here now, I am recording this lecture, so don't say anything crazy. But then also, since we're doing our lecture today on drugs, we're going to push off our presentations and our crime scene presentations to Thursday. Hopefully, we'll be back in class on Thursday. I have no idea what's happening because I haven't gone to campus since Thursday last week. So all I know is some crazy stuff is happening up there, and if you're on campus right now, like any freshmen that live on campus, or anybody who lives on campus, if you know what's going on, let me know because I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so we'll push off our presentations, our crime scene presentations till Thursday, and that means then that both the crime scene PowerPoint And the crime scene PowerPoint and the lab reports will be due on Thursday at 9:30 before class starts. That way, no one is cheating by watching anybody else's presentation and then changing their answers. Um, so you have a couple extra days for those of you who have already finished it. Um, uh, you have 2 extra days to make it even better. Okay, so we'll do. That's what we'll do. So assuming we're back on Thursday, we'll do that on Thursday. Um, and then next week, Marla will come in and do her talk on drugs too. I'm giving you the lecture on drugs today, but Marla will come in on Tuesday next week and give you her experiences as a drug chemist. Not a chemist making drugs like like Breaking Bad or anything like that, but like investigating drug crime is what I meant to say. All right, so the let me go ahead and share screen here if I know how to do that. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, or send a message in the chat. I have the chat open right now, so I can see if you're asking a question or something like that. Or you could raise your hand the old-fashioned way. I haven't done this in a while. I haven't done a virtual class in a very long time, so I'm still trying to remember how to do all this stuff here. So let's do share screen. All right, and then do this, maximize this. Hopefully this works. And then I'm going to do that. And then I want to open my PowerPoint. Is this the right one? There it is. And then we'll do this. Oops, that's you're seeing the wrong one. So let's switch around here. How do you switch this side? Display settings. Swap. There we go. That works. That works. And then I'll move this over here so I can see your chats. All right. So today we're talking about drugs, and we should get through this whole thing today. So fill in your notes, and we'll do our presentations on Thursday. Okay. I don't have a. I don't know what I use to change my slides. I don't even know. Hold on 1 second here. There we go. There we go. Now I can see everything. All right. Okay. All right. So today we're talking about drugs, and so here's our learning objectives. I know it sounds like a lot today, and it is, because there's a lot of drugs to talk about. But that's also why we're doing drugs for 2 days. We'll finish this day, but we'll talk more about drugs tomorrow. Comes out on Tuesday next week. We'll talk about dependences, physical and psychological dependence. We'll talk about drug classifications. We'll also talk about narcotics and synthetic opioids. We'll talk about marijuana, synthetic cannabinoids, and other hallucinogens, alcohol and other depressants, cocaine and stimulants, club drugs, and anabolic steroids, which I have I actually have I have experience with anabolic steroids, not myself personally, but whoopsies, that's not right. What happened here? How do you make this thing right? Like that. And what color should I use? Maybe I should I'll use gold today. But I think I told you guys before that we had a professor back at Auburn who was in charge of the mass spec lab, and he was testing illegal steroids, and we got raided by the DEA. It was pretty crazy. We'll also talk about drug control laws and schedules. That's also very interesting. Marla has a story about a shake. I think I've told you that story, but she can tell it better because it was her case. And then we'll describe how we collect drugs, and that's important for you too because your last crime scene will indeed have drugs on it. Then we'll talk about quantitative and qualitative analysis, screening and confirmation tests, and then chromatography and spectrometry. We've actually discussed that already before in trace evidence, but we're just gonna talk about it a little bit here. Okay. So first thing to talk about, this is Pablo Escobar. He's one of my heroes. No, I'm just kidding. But if you've watched the show Narcos before, and I've talked about it in class before, how he instead of actually selling, everybody calls it narcos, and they think everybody thinks that narcotics are all the same, and they're all the same kind of drug, but it's not. Narcotics are usually painkillers, and Pablo Escobar did not sell narcotics. He actually called cocaine. He sold cocaine, and cocaine is a stimulant, and so not a narcotic. That's important to know. And I know Marla has already told me before that the word narco means drugs in Spanish, but I always still think that they should call the show Stimulantes, uh, if anything because it's funny, but also because I think it's funny anyway, but also because it'll help you remember because it might be a question on an exam. So yes, remember that cocaine is not a narcotic. It is a stimulant. Some interesting things about Pablo because he's one of my heroes. I'm just kidding. He's not a hero, but he trafficked as much as 11 tons. Wow, 11 tons of cocaine per flight on commercial flights to the U.S., mostly to Miami. That's a lot. That's a lot of freaking cocaine. Um, his Medellin cartel was controlled about 80% of the drug, the cocaine market, and so annually, this guy was bringing in $25 billion, like $25 billion. Like some of the richest people in the world are their net worth is $25 billion, right? But this guy was bringing $25 billion annually. He had so much money, he was hiding it in. I think I've said this before, but he was hiding it in like by burying it underground in random places in Colombia, and till this day, people are still in the rural areas of Colombia digging up his money. That's probably he tried to save it by putting plastic wrap around it, but maybe plastic doesn't last forever, and so the money's all like waterlogged and messed up now. But anyway, that's a lot of money, right? Uh, he was also very dangerous too. Like the interesting thing about that is that to the people, he was kind of like the Robin Hood because to kind of get away with some of the crimes he was committing, he would always do things like donate money to the school or donate money to a park and help the poor and that kind of stuff. So they kind of considered him the Robin Hood. That's what the general public thought he was. But while at the same time he was assassinating political figures that would stand in his way, people who were like the Minister of Justice or a judge or whoever that were trying to stand in the way of his crime syndicate, right? It wasn't until later on when he was actually he started bombing places. Like there was a plane, and then there was a pharmacy where hundreds of civilians died when the public started turning against him. But up until then, he was definitely a hero to the public on at in Colombia, specifically Medellin. So he actually died after a very long manhunt. People have been looking for him for a very long time. He ended up dying from getting shot in the back of the ear by a police officer while he was escaping from one of his last hideouts. If you've never seen the show Narcos on Netflix before, it's actually a really good show. It's very interesting. Not completely correct, right? But it's a pretty interesting show. So I recommend watching that. And you learn a lot about drugs and learn a lot about cocaine and the way it was back in the 80s and the 90s. It was like the Wild West back then when it came to physical evidence. So, Wild West, right? Anyway, so here's your first question for today, right? I don't know if I fixed this yet, but your question for what's it called? Attendance. Which of the following is not true about Pablo Escobar? He trafficked in narcotics. He was a Colombian drug lord. The general public considered him Robin Hood, additionally. Or he was killed in the back of the ear. Shot in the back of the ear during a shootout. Excuse me. Go ahead and answer that. And that will be your attendance for today. I just realized that some of you might not be able to even reach that question because you may be using your phones. Is that right? Is anybody using their phone to watch this lecture?
I'm using my phone.
Okay, let me put a link on in the chat for you real quick. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Let me put a link in the chat. I forgot that this is how we do things. Hold on a second here. I'm going to stop sharing. One second here. I have to find the link. 1 second. I forgot what is this. Drugs, narcotics. What was the name of this thing? Drugs. No, drug. Pablo. Ah, there it is. It is Pablo. Pablo Escobar. Let's see here. Collect responses. Here it is. Here's the link. Copy. All right, I'm putting the link right now. Paste. Okay, the link is in the chat for you to answer the question. All right, let's go back to sharing is caring. Okay. And then, which lecture was I on? Did I close it on accident? Surely I did. Oh, there it is. Okay. Display settings, swap. There we go. Okay. There we go. All right, I think someone just asked the question. He was El Chapo before El Chapo should have been an answer choice. That's true. That's so true. So true. I actually, so funny thing about El Chapo, I guess you would call her my neighbor from two houses down. I was about to say next door, but she's not my next door neighbor. But she's like two houses down, and she was actually a linguist. She went to school to be a linguist, and she worked for the DEA, and she was actually a part of the investigations into El Chapo. Like she would be a translator and stuff. So it's kind of fun when me and her get together to talk because I talk about all kinds of like murders and stuff like that I've investigated, and she talks about El Chapo. So anyway, all right. Has everybody been able to answer the question, or at least sign in and stuff like that? Right? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, good. All right, so the link is still there if you need it. I'm going to keep on going here so we can get through all this today. The answer is, of course, A, he did not traffic in narcotics. He actually trafficked in stimulants, right? So stimulants are what cocaine is, what cocaine is, and we'll learn more about them in the coming lecture notes, right? All right, so let's talk about here's the introduction. In introduction, we'll talk about the physical and psychological dependencies. Right? There's actually two different ways you can get addicted to drugs, and one of them is physiological, and one of them is psychological. Right? And so different drugs will allow for different types of dependencies. And so depending which it is, the harder it is for you to kind of kick that habit or that dependency, right? And I think most of you already know too that there's synthetic drugs and there's also natural drugs, things like marijuana or cocaine that come from plants. Those are all natural drugs. And then there's synthetic drugs like crystal meth and stuff like that. A funny thing about crystal meth, I don't know why, but we started rewatching Breaking Bad the other day, and it's actually not a bad show too. So if you've not seen Breaking Bad, it's kind of fun. Anyway, so I forgot to change my pen here so I can start writing. I guess I'll do green now since money is green. All right, so sorry. Let's talk about psychological dependence, right? The common denominator. I'm still sharing. I'm sharing my screen. Just making sure I'm sharing my screen. Yeah, I am. Okay. The common denominator that characterizes all types of repeated drug use is the creation of psychological dependence. And so the way you can get so have you ever heard of heard any of your friends who are like friends that are drug users, your friends say things like, yeah, I'm not like, I'm not like psychologically addictive to things, like I don't get addicted to things because they're not like psychological. I don't I'll give you an example. Uh, uh, some people can drink alcohol and not get alcoholism, right? Not become an alcoholic. And so for me, for example, me back when I was in college, back when I was at Auburn, it was a party school at Auburn, and there was a lot of drinking happening in Auburn, right? And I mean, they let you have on Saturdays had let you have alcohol on campus, and so no matter how much I drank, which was a lot, I never actually got dependent on it, right? But my friend, also my roommate, did, and he actually became an alcoholic, which is a really bad thing. And so um, I don't know if he's. I haven't seen him since I graduated, but I think he's fine because we all graduated together. So, but the point is he was definitely like he could not stop drinking, whereas I could stop drinking, and uh, and so there's definitely a some truth to people saying, I'm not like an addictive person. I'm not like a psychologically addictive person. Some people can be psychologically addicted to things, and some people can resist that. And so I did tons of binge drinking, but I never, I was never as into it as my friend was and my roommate was. So, and I say that only to demonstrate the first bullet point here that says, the user's personal characteristics, right? That's a big factor in a person being psychologically dependent. If it runs in the family too, it could be a genetical thing, a genetics thing. I don't think genetical is a word. And then also, society's attitudes. And again, when I say society's attitudes, it's just like, we're lucky here on campus at Leslie, and there's not, a huge party culture or drinking on Saturdays on campus, campus allowed, but at other schools, like the school I went to, that was a huge part of the culture, right? You don't go watch a football game unless you have a beer in your hand, right? And so it's a tough needle to thread sometimes when you're in college and are so susceptible, impressionable, and then you get exposed to these kinds of things, right? And so that's why that's a thing. That's why psychological dependence is a thing. So, what are some things that you can get psychologically dependent on? You can get dependent on alcohol, as I just said. Heroin is one of those things too. Cocaine. All those with continued use will lead to some high degree of psychological dependence. Interesting enough, right? The thing that everybody calls a gateway drug, which I think is just a propaganda thing the DEA used to use, uh, marijuana and codeine, they have they have a very much lower potential for drug use, right? But the interesting thing is that a lot of people call marijuana the gateway drug. I mean, if you're doing marijuana, if it's like marijuana, like good marijuana, like clean marijuana, not like laced with things, you're probably fine. But the problem is like when you go buy marijuana, especially cheap stuff, and Marla can tell you more about this than I can because she was the one that did all of she did all of this kind of investigations. People will lace it with like PCP and fentanyl and other things like that. And when they get laced with things, well, they got cheap like brick type of marijuana that doesn't have a lot of THC in it. So to supplement it, though it's cheaper to buy, but to supplement to get you some sort of high, they'll lace it with stuff like PCP or fentanyl or stuff like that.
And then that's the stuff you get dependent on. It's not actually the marijuana itself, right? So be careful about that. Codeine, of course, is a Tylenol, not like the Tylenol that's over the counter, but like when you get like when you break a leg and they give you Tylenol with codeine, stuff like that. There's also physiological dependence. The big difference between physiological and psychological dependence is that when you are physiologically dependent on something, it will trying to stop using it will cause withdrawal symptoms, right? You'll feel all that like the sweating, the like you feel like you have throw up all the time, nausea all the time, and stuff like that, right? Um, so marijuana, LSD, and cocaine are common drugs of abuse whose regular use does not lead to physical dependence. So that's interesting, right? That's interesting that cocaine doesn't actually lead to physiological dependence, right? But I already talked about how marijuana is like, as long as it's not laced with something, it's not a physical dependence type of thing. All right, so here are some drug classifications, right? Did you guys see that? I don't know what's happening here. 1 second here. This thing is not updating. That's okay. I can see it on this screen. All right, so here's some drug classifications. There's the narcotics, right? That includes, oopsies. I need to put my pen back on. Right. So there's the narcotics, right? The narcotics, these are morphine, heroin, methadone, and codeine. Like I said, they're the painkillers, right? A lot of people get prescribed morphine for pain, codeine for pain. Those are all for painkillers. And then we have our depressants. We have the barbiturates, right? Long and short acting. Alcohol is also a depressant, right? Quaaludes. I actually have never heard of Meprobamate. I've never heard of that before, right? Milltown or Equinil as their street names, I guess, or their trade names. I've never even heard of those before. I don't think I've ever seen those. Valium or diazepam. That's I think the street name for that is actually bars. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Again, not a drug expert here. And then I've never heard of this one either. Chlorodiazepoxide. Never heard of that one either before. But I have heard of these, right? Stimulants, amphetamines. Amphetamines includes crystal meth. And so that's, that's you don't want to get mixed up with crystal meth. You can't see my face right now because I'm sharing a screen, but I'm shaking my head because you do not want to get mixed up with crystal meth. It's those things that will really like eat away at your teeth. You'll have like messed up like teeth. I can't tell you how scary it is. Oh, you can't see my face? Can you see the project? Can you see the PowerPoint too? Huh, weird. How are you seeing my face and you seeing how are you seeing my face and seeing the PowerPoint at the same time? Is it like kind of picture in picture type of thing? Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Then you can see I'm shaking my face. I'm shaking my head. It's bad. Don't get don't get into crystal meth. It's bad for your teeth. All right, it's very bad for your teeth. Um, uh, I'm trying to remember. Like I remember this. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it like a few years ago? Somebody in Florida was like attacked by. Sorry if you hear snoring. That's my dog. Somebody in Florida was attacked by what they called a zombie or something like that, and it turned out that he was on crystal meth. Does anybody remember that? God, that was a long time ago. That was back in the early 2000s, I think, because I was in Germany when it happened, and I remember getting news reports on my phone saying there's like a zombie apocalypse happening. Oh, was it bath salts? Okay, my bad. I thought it was crystal meth. See, I don't remember. He mixed it with. Oh, I got you. He mixed the. Oh, see, that's a bad combination. Don't mix crystal meth with bath salts because then you'll turn into a zombie. Bad idea, right? Bad idea. Um, so yeah, and I'm sure his teeth were messed up too. So if there's one thing I'm scared of is messed up teeth from crystal meth, right? So just don't do it, right? Crazy stuff, crazy stuff. Anyway, so again, cocaine is a stimulant, caffeine is also a stimulant, nicotine is also a stimulant, and then of course we have our hallucinogens, marijuana, LSD, and then PCP, which is the phencyclidine. So interesting thing, they list marijuana under hallucinogens, um, and almost like it's like shrooms or something. I don't know, but so I've experimented with marijuana before in the past. Don't worry, all the law enforcement agencies know about it. It's because they make you go through like a lie detector, and then one of the questions they ask you is, "Have you ever done marijuana or something like that?" So you have to answer honestly. If they find out you're lying, you're not going to get the job. Anyway, in any of my times, experimenting with marijuana back when I was in college, I've never had a hallucination before. So I'm not really sure why I'm not sure why they label it as a hallucinogen, but maybe other people have had hallucinations on marijuana, but I've never seen that before. Anyway, so let's talk about each of the narcotics, right? So again, narcotics are definitely another word for them is analgesics, right? And what they do is they relieve pain, and they relieve pain by suppressing the central nervous system. Okay. Uh, Again, regular use will lead to physical dependence, right? So you're going to have some withdrawal symptoms if you take some and you get addicted, and then you try to drop it, and then it's going to be a bad situation, right? So the most common source of narcotics is opium, right? Extracted from poppies, right? So they always tell you, if you're about to have a drug test, like a random drug test, don't don't eat a poppy seed bagel. I don't know if that's true or not because I don't like poppy seed bagels. But I mean, why even risk it, right? Or why even risk it? Um, they actually used to do, or they still do, at my law enforcement agency I work for. They did random drug tests once a quarter, and so you definitely didn't want to. And it was random too, so it was just better to just stay away from poppy seed bagels to begin with. They also did drug tests on you too if you were ever in a vehicle accident, like if you were driving an agency vehicle and you got into a car accident, they drug test you then too. So probably because they didn't want you to be under the influence in a state vehicle. Uh, you have to eat a lot of bagels to have it pop up on a drug test. Yeah, I still wouldn't risk it though. So you're probably right because when you eat it, right, it goes in your stomach and your stomach's got a lot of acid in it, and it breaks it down. It breaks it all down. So there's really, it'd be difficult to have it show up on a drug test. Let's see. Excuse me. Let's see. Okay, so morphine. Morphine is readily extracted from opium, right? And is used to synthesize heroin, right? So you can get morphine to synthesize heroin, and so I think people used to be the really sad part is that people back in like the World War II and around that era, 50s, 60s, 70s, they were getting addicted to morphine because of pain, right? Whether they were at war or whatever it was during battle and stuff, and they were injured, and they so they got addicted to morphine, and I believe they actually synthesized morphine from they synthesized heroin from morphine to try to get people off of heroin because they were addicted to morphine. But then heroin became the thing that they were addicted to. So yeah, crazy stuff, right? This is just how you use heroin. I would not recommend doing that. Heroin produces a high that is accompanied by drowsiness and a sense of well-being that just generally lasts for 2 to 3 hours. That's how long your high will last if you are on heroin. Codeine is also present in opium, but is usually prepared synthetically from morphine. So you can see how a lot of these things that we use today for painkilling are derivatives of things like morphine, right? Or sorry, not well morphine, but also from like opium. So yeah, the military tells us that line. The line of heroin, of morphine to heroin addiction type of thing. Yeah, yeah. So there are synthetic opioids too that are not derived from that are not derived from opium, right? We have OxyContin. Lots of people are prescribed OxyContin for pain, and so you can get addicted to that too. Methadone as well. Methadone addiction is a thing too, and so another synthetic opioid. Pharmacologically, it's related to heroin, right? Crazy, but it appears to eliminate the addict's desire for heroin while producing minimal side effects. So, methadone can be used to help us with the people that have heroin addiction. So yeah. Then I wanted to talk about fentanyl for a while, right? A little bit. So this is how much heroin is required for you to overdose, right here. There's this thing called fentanyl, right? I mentioned it a second ago, where I don't know why people call it fentanyl. It's actually called fentanyl. And so stop saying fentanyl if you're saying fentanyl. That's a very specific thing. That means something very specific in chemistry, so it's fentanyl. And so all you need is a few little granules of fentanyl, right? And you can overdose on it. And so the thing that would happen a lot in the crime lab is that people would get evidence in, and it would be laced with fentanyl. And so when they open up the evidence, they cut it. I showed you how to seal evidence with the tape and all that in the bags. They would cut open the evidence, and not knowing that there was fentanyl inside, all this fentanyl dust would just fly in the air, right? And you would breathe it in, and you would overdose. So they have this thing here called Narcan. We were all trained on Narcan, right? And so if you ever get exposure to fentanyl, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to inhale the Narcan spray, also called a scientific word is or scientific name is naloxone. And so, oh yeah, it says it right there on the box, naloxone HCl. Anyway, and so when you're at the crime lab, you're all supposed to be trained on Narcan, so that you'd be able to either treat someone. Well, yeah, someone else would have to treat you, because if you're overdosing on fentanyl, you're pretty much unconscious. And so it was a pretty dangerous thing at the crime lab when we were dealing with, and you think it was only drug cases, right, that would have to deal with that, but there would be fentanyl like on clothing, there would be fentanyl on guns, on knives, all kinds of stuff, and it was a dangerous thing. And so down here, this is actually a memorial at the DEA of all the people who have died from overdosing on fentanyl. And you think that fentanyl is one of those things that, fentanyl is one of those things that, how can it get any worse than that? Well, it can. There's this thing called carfentanil. Carfentanil is 100 times worse than fentanyl. Only a single speck of it can cause you to overdose, right? And so that's a bad situation. So one of the interesting things is that Narcan actually only helps when you're overdosing on a narcotic. It doesn't help with anything else. And so, like, if a person's overdosing on like cocaine or something like that, or no, I guess the most common thing would be ecstasy, right? Narcan's not going to help with that. But the thing is, though, you don't know, right? When someone is actually overdosing on something, you don't know for sure what they're overdosing on, because if you weren't there doing it with them, you don't know, right? And so, especially if it's drugs from a case, right, from evidence, you don't know what's in it, right? So the best thing to do is just to use Narcan and maybe mitigate the situation. And so Narcan's they have it in the crime labs, definitely. So then we get to the hallucinogens. So I don't know why marijuana is listed as a hallucinogen, but it's the most widely used illicit drug. Marla will tell you when she comes in on Tuesday next week that 90% of her cases were marijuana cases, right? I guess in Alabama there wasn't much to do, and so everybody was smoking weed in Alabama. There was at one time, I think I told you guys before, but her team had just raided this huge. Was it her team or was it another team? I can't remember, but somebody's team raided this huge like clandestine marijuana farm, and they brought in these huge bales. Looked like hay, but it was bales of marijuana, and it was so big that they couldn't actually sample it. So they asked the people in the firearms unit to come over and help them break it down with a chainsaw. And that was before that was before COVID, so nobody was wearing a mask, and the marijuana flew everywhere when I was chainsawing it. I breathed in a little bit of it, and we'll just say that I did not have to take a drug test for a couple quarters after that. They exempted me from the drug test. So yeah, I guess I think the more common thing for hallucinogens is like mushrooms, like shrooms, also known as like psilocybins. I think that my friend, I won't say his name, but a friend of mine was really into shrooms, and uh, and the way he would do it is that he would actually take mushrooms and like put it into water and like use it as tea, like use it as tea leaves, and just drink the tea. But I've never had any kind of experience with anything that crazy. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know why though that they consider marijuana a hallucinogen. Um, so here's marijuana, right? Here's marijuana. This is some really good looking marijuana, by the way. Like, I mean, look at those hairs right there. Look at those syphilis hairs right there. Those are amazing. Uh, that's what you want. There are some people who will take like a very good batch of plants, and they'll put it into like a sifter, and they'll just kind of shake the sifter and hope that all those little crystals, those THC crystals, fall off, and just smoke that. But most people don't can't get their hands on that really nice. Most people get this stuff here, right? Or even like seeds in there. That's terrible stuff. But anyway, marijuana, right? Cannabis, okay? The active ingredient that makes you um the active ingredient that's got the properties, the psychotropic properties, is tetrahydrocannabinol, also known as THC. And so the THC content actually is different in different parts of the plant, right? Uh, Generally in decreasing order, right? We have the resin, and then in the flowers, and then the leaves, and then there's a little bit of THC in the stems, the seed, the roots, and the seeds, right? Uh, uh, there's a little bit there, right? Rich resin from cannabis plant is known as hashish, and then marijuana does not cause physical dependency, uh, but the risk of harm is heavy to long-term use. I don't know if that's super true or not, but yeah. So yeah, that's marijuana for you. I don't know a lot about marijuana, but Marla knows a lot about marijuana. So if you have any questions about it, just ask her. So they go through a very extensive drug education program when they're drug chemists, right, at the agency. So there's also synthetic cannabinoids, right? Excuse me for 1 second. All right. So there are also synthetic cannabinoids too. So Marla had to deal with a lot of these too. She'll tell you some stories. The I think that the biggest thing about synthetic cannabinoids is that there people what they'll do is that they'll just take oregano, which kind of looks like marijuana actually. You'll see it when we do our drug lab next week. You'll look at what they call is simulated marijuana, but really it's just oregano. And if you look at it under the microscope, it has these things called syphilis hairs. Those are the little clear things you see on them on the leaf on the plant, and they look like little bear claws, right? Little bear claws. So if you know Baylor, bear claw, whatever. Anyway, and so uh, if you look at oregano under the scope, it looks a lot like marijuana does, right? And so what people will do is that they'll make this mixture of synthetic cannabinoids, molecules that look a lot like THC but are not exactly THC, and they'll spray it onto oregano leaves or any plant for that matter. It could be grass. It doesn't even matter, right? And they'll put it in these packages, right, that you can take home and you can smoke. The problem with it though is that if a person, this is all done by hand, right? And so if a person is spraying the chemical, whatever the synthetic cannabinoid is, onto the plant, and they're heavy-handed over here, and they're not as heavy-handed on the other side, right? You have a very uneven distribution of synthetic cannabinoids on your plant, right? And then they take the plant and they cut it up into pieces, and then they put it in these packages, and then you could have one right here, one package of let's say Scooby snacks, right? One package of Scooby snacks that is super like susceptible for overdosing, while the other one not so much, right? And say you buy two of them, and one of them is super susceptible for overdosing, and the other one is not. You do the one that's not, right? And you're like, okay, I can't get high off this stuff. I need to use more. Then you open up the second bag, and that one's got a lot of stuff on it. Then you can see how that's a recipe for overdose. And that's a big problem with synthetic cannabinoids. The law is very behind the times when it comes to synthetic cannabinoids, and so again, they're just the same, almost the same thing as THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, the cannabinol, and the only difference is that there's some different molecules that are attached to it, different parts of the molecule are different, but very similar, right? And so if you ever see the word or the prefix, not prefix, what it's called, suffix, the suffix "oid" on anything in science, right? It means like it, but not exactly it, right? So whatever these are, they are like THC or cannabidiols, right? But they're not exactly it. And so that's the biggest problem. And you see, Marla will tell you about this too. This whole, her favorite is this one over here. Someone here, I don't know whether or not it was because they don't know how to spell or something, or no one proofread their stuff right there. But that's not how you spell psycho, right? That's actually pronounced pisco, pisco, however you say that, right? And so I'm sure they were trying to do psycho, but they spelled did it pisco, whatever, pisco. The interesting thing is that when you're cataloging evidence, you have to write exactly what it says on the package. And most people will read that and say, "Oh, that's psycho," and they'll write in psycho, right? And then after they write in psycho, they just move on. They don't even notice. But then when you go to court, and then they see the evidence, and it doesn't say pisco, right? But it says psycho instead. You can't even use that evidence against the suspect anymore because you didn't do your due diligence and cataloging the evidence, right? So for those of you who are cataloging evidence, make sure you are very specific about the things that you see and the things that you collect, right? Marla's got more stories about that. She'll tell you a lot about these synthetic cannabinoids. Some other hallucinogens, right? There's LSD. So these are like little LSD stamps, little papers, right, that have SpongeBob on them, right? There's also ecstasy, which is MDMA, right? And then the psilocybins and PCP. We talked about PCP a little bit earlier, but psilocybins, those are the mushrooms, right? And here's the ecstasy, right? They look like little vitamin tablets or candies that kids can eat, right? So yeah, PCP is often mixed with other things like LSD, amphetamines, and so does a powder called angel dust. Stay away from that. That's very bad, right? Angel dust is bad. It's got a bunch of crap in it that can really mess you up, right? So if you take PCP orally, it leads to feelings of strength and invulnerability, which may turn into depression tendencies and violence and suicide. Yeah, no one wants to do PCP. Very bad, very bad. That's my picture for PCP, by the way. Depressants. The most commonly known depressant is marijuana. Sorry, alcohol, right? And so what do? They depress the central nervous system. Okay. Some people, right? They can get very. They can calm down, right, from being irritable. Anxiety will help them. It will also help them sleep. I think that's why my roommate did it. Why he drank a lot of alcohol. He couldn't sleep at night, and so he would just drink a lot of alcohol, and it would help him sleep at night. So ethanol or alcohol, right? Ethanol is a scientific name for it. Barbiturates, and then anti-anxiety drugs and other things like that. Huffing paint and huffing, sniffing things, glue, right? Rubber cement, and aerosol from gas propellants like Freon. Those can all be depressants. Those can all be depressants. So let's talk about alcohol and barbiturates real quick. Um, Alcohol, of course, acts on the brain, the bloodstream right here. Excuse me. And then it suppresses the brain control and the muscle coordination. So that's why it's very bad to drink and drive. It suppresses your ability to be alert. And so, if something happens while you're driving, you can't react in time. It's a bad idea. Barbiturates, also known as downers, right? Normally taken orally and create a feeling of well-being. They relax the body and they produce sleep. This is not to be confused with bars. Bars are Xanax, right? So a lot of people think bars right here are barbiturates because they both start with bars, but that's not true. Bars are actually Xanax, right? Barbiturates are called downers. Some other depressants, right? So here's Xanax right here, right? Xanax, Valium, right? Those are all anti-anxiety drugs. And so, but then there's huffing. This lady here was actually found huffing I think it was an aerosol paint can or something like that. Yeah, like a spray paint, and at Walmart. And you don't want to huff, all right? Because continued use will do that to your face, right? So be careful about that. Stimulants, right? So we're going to the stimulants now. So, of course, amphetamines, also known as uppers or speed, that's also crystal meth, right? So those are crystal meth is a part of amphetamines, okay? And then also there's cocaine, right? And then there's also the free-base form of cocaine called crack cocaine. Marla will talk a lot about that right there. I'll let her tell you some stories about some crack cocaine. Stimulants they increase alertness and activity, followed by decrease in fatigue and loss of appetite. Amphetamines and methamphetamines, which is crystal meth, right? They're usually injected intravenously, pills. They cause initial rush, and followed by an intense feeling of pleasure, right? And then after that, you get a severe depression, right? So, it's probably why people want to do crystal meth and they can't get off of it because afterwards they're depressed and they want to get back to that rush right there, right? And so again, Marla will tell you a lot about her personal experiences with her meth cases. Cocaine, which is what Pablo Escobar dealt in, or I guess he didn't deal it because he was the top of the pack, right? As distributed. There we go. That's probably what we use there. The same phrase we use. Cocaine comes from the coca plant, right? So that's the coca plant right there, right? There's some crazy stuff people will do to get cocaine into the country, right? They'll do things like they'll extract the molecule from the plant and then they'll soak it into water and soak it into like paper, or they'll dissolve it in water and soak it into paper or something like that, and then they'll bring the paper into the country because it won't be flagged because it's just paper, and then they'll get a chemist to extract it from the paper, and now you've got like cocaine. So some crazy stuff there. A lot like crystal meth, gives you a lot of alertness and vigor, accompanied by suppression of hunger, fatigue, and boredom. Right. So a lot very similar to crystal meth right there. There's crack cocaine, right? Crack cocaine is just mixed with baking soda and water, if you didn't know, right? And so crack cocaine is often smoked in glass pipes. It stimulates the brain's pleasure center. And so these are actually crack cocaine cookies right here, right? So don't think those are sugar cookies or something. That's a dangerous thing, right? Don't do that. So that is why April just wrote. That is why poisons and jails don't allow mail to go through prisoners. It gets scanned in the computer to be read by the. That's true. That's actually very true. That's very true. And then I think somebody else is writing something too. Uh, prisoners were smoking the meal that was soaked in drugs. Absolutely. I think Trinity, weren't you writing something, or did you stop? Maybe you stopped. You stopped. That's okay. Oh yeah, Marla's got some stories about some crack cocaine cookies too. Oh man, you think that like doing like murder investigations is like fun? It's not fun, but doing but doing like drug investigations is pretty interesting stuff. Like the
Oh,
things that she gets sometimes. Someone's talking. Go ahead.
oh yeah. What I was typing is that Whitney Houston, when she was in an interview about her cocaine,
Yeah.
like her failed rehabilitations,
Yeah.
the interviewer called it crack,
Uh huh.
and then Whitney Houston got very mad, and she was like, "Crack is cheap." She was like, "I make too much money to ever do crack," and I think that's so funny. So
That's a that's true. Crack cocaine, because cocaine is expensive. Crack cocaine is really cheap. So and it's expensive because cocaine is pure, from the coca plant, right? Whereas crack is mixed with stuff like baking soda and water and turned into something that's got a mixture of both of those things, right? So it's a lot less cocaine content, right? So yes, Whitney Houston would be correct in saying that crack cocaine is definitely cheap, right? And that's what you actually see a lot out. That's actually what you see a lot of on the street these days. Like it's like crack cocaine, not exactly like the purest kind of stuff, right? So thank you for that, Trinity. I didn't even know that. I've never seen that interview, but now I have to look it up because it sounds really funny.
There
Yeah, I
was
think
a there was a
go ahead.
documentary on Netflix, and it was like cops, corruption, and cocaine. Is I think it was what the title was. And the very first episode, they talked about how cocaine, when it first came out, it was for rich white people only because it was so expensive.
Oh yeah,
And then they realized that they could actually make a profit if they made it into crack cocaine and they could sell it to the poor population. And that's when we had the crack epidemic of the 80s, was because they were trying to make a profit and market to outside of just the rich white people.
absolutely.
It's a very interesting documentary because it dives into how communities and gentrification and all that happened in the 80s from crack cocaine came out. It's very interesting.
That is really interesting. So I don't know if you've seen it before, but like when you watch like historical videos or historical documentaries, and like back in the 1800s, 1700s kind of thing, uh, you'll see like royalty just sniff like white powder. That's like pure cocaine right there, right? That's not like crack, right? So definitely for rich people.
Didn't they do opium a lot in the Western days? Like, wasn't that a treatment for like depression and stuff or something like that?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Perlo, were you going to say something? I saw you typing. Okay, maybe not. All right. All right. So cocaine is very interesting, and if you want to learn more about cocaine, check out that documentary that April just mentioned, corruption, cops, and cocaine. I guess what was called on Netflix, and then also Narcos. That's another one that's good about a good thing about cocaine, right? So we have club drugs too, right? Club drugs are synthetic, and those are things like MDMA, which is ecstasy, and ketamine and methamphetamine, and so a lot of people will use like GHB and Rohypnol to like they'll put it into like a girl's drink, and then they'll make them all sleepy, and then they'll take them back to their room or wherever, and they'll assault them, right? And so GHB are probably the most common that's used for what they would call date rape. And so they've come out with a whole bunch of different safety measures for that. So when you're at a bar or something like that, you can know whether or not your drink has been roofied. And so someone just put up a YouTube. That YouTube must be the documentary that April's talking about. Anyway, and so the YouTube link. So yeah, so bars will have these drinks that are in these special glasses or special straws and stuff like that will turn red when it detects a roofie. Or something like that, either GHB or Rohypnol, right? And so just be aware of that kind of stuff. And then also, let's see here. Oh yeah, ecstasy. These are just other ecstasy pills I've seen before, right? Other ecstasy pills, right? So anabolic steroids. So people want bigger muscles, I guess, and so they'll take anabolic steroids. When I was at Auburn, our mass spec director Yanni Wu was actually testing illegal anabolic steroids from China, and it was crazy because we kept on getting these packages of like green tea from China that were for Yanni, and we were like, "What's this? What's all this green tea?" Well, he doesn't drink that much tea, right? Turned out that it was all anabolic steroids, illegal from China, and so he was testing them because this illegal black market like deep web website that was selling illegal steroids wanted to put on their website that these steroids have been like verified like pure by an Auburn University or an American university's like mass spec lab, right? And so of course the DEA got wind of it, and one day while we were all just at school doing a normal thing, the DEA raids our school and or at least our building, go into the mass spec lab and take everything, like the computers, the mass spec, everything. I mean, talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars wasted. But anyway, so yeah, they arrested Yanni Wu, and the crazy thing about that was that like 6 months later, I run into Yanni Wu at a Hobby Lobby, and I was at first I was kind of scared, and then I was like, Yanni Wu, shouldn't you be in like federal prison right now? And he said, oh no, I'm not, I'm awaiting sentencing right now. I'm like, oh, okay, well, still though, that's a little scary right there, buddy. So anyway, Yanni Wu for you, crazy. Anyway, so the anabolic steroids. What do anabolic steroids do? They're a chemical that is related to the male sex hormone testosterone, right? And what it does is it promotes secondary male characteristics and accelerates muscle growth, right? And so steroid abuse was first received attention with athletes. And so things that it does to affect men, headaches, baldness, strokes and blood clots, high blood pressure, nausea, bloating, impotence, right? Lowers your sperm count. That's not good. Guys, don't do steroids. Lowers your sperm count, right? Shrinks your testicles, increases your prostate size. That could get you some prostate cancer, very bad. Aggressive behavior, aching joints, liver damage, and all that stuff, right? So it can affect all these things. It affects men, right? For women, though, all those same things too, but also for women, decreases breast size, decreases breast size, increases clitoris size, gives you facial and body hair, deepens your voice, and menstrual issues, right? So it's a bad idea to do anabolic steroids. Bad idea for both sexes. So the drug laws, the primary drug law in the U.S. is the Controlled Substances Act, right? And so it's established 5 schedules for classification for drugs based on potential for abuse, whether that's physical or psychological dependence, and its medical value. And so these are the 5 criteria: Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right there. And you can see the classifications and what the classifications are, right? And so Schedule 1 drugs are things like heroin, peyote, ecstasy, marijuana. I can't believe they have marijuana as a Schedule 1 drug. This might be old because marijuana is illegal. Sorry, marijuana is legal in a lot of states now, right? So this might be old. But even then, back then when marijuana was labeled as Schedule 1, that's kind of crazy. Things like codeine, right? Codeine and oxycodone and methadone, morphine, opium, all those things are Schedule 2, right? Let's see here. Cocaine was also Schedule 2, right? Fentanyl is Schedule 2. Tylenol, codeine, and ketamine, right? Ketamine. Let's see here. Anabolic steroids, all those are Schedule 3. That's probably why Yanni Wu got arrested right there. because steroids are Schedule 3. Schedule 4, all the PAMs, diazepam, lorazepam, tabazepam, right? All those PAMs right there. So bars and downers. And then Schedule 5 are things like Robitussin AC, other things with codeine in it, right? Limited potential for abuse, right? Collection and preservation. The field investigator must be responsible for ensuring that the evidence is properly packaged, labeled for the laboratory. That's important. Remember that. Properly packaged and labeled. Because remember, you don't want to have that psycho thing happen. Are these classifications the legal classes or just the forensic classes? These are the legal classes. These classes are from the National Controlled Substances Act. So they're the legal ones. There's also, you're right though, there is the forensic one that is based on there's one that's not really the forensic one, but it's based on the Department of Health, which is a completely different schedule thing, right? So, but this is the national schedules. All right. So you want to make sure there's no cross-contamination, right? But sometimes that's not, sometimes you can't get away from contamination there. And then also maintain chain of custody like we always have to do. Right? But the biggest thing is you don't want to have a psycho problem, right? Or Paisto problem. Drug identification. We'll do a lot of this stuff actually in lab where it's a color test, and all you do is you drop some chemicals in it, it turns a certain color. And when it turns a certain color, you can see it was positive control there, negative control there, and the sample, right? And you see how it's purple in the positive control, and it's purple there. So there's definitely some drugs listed there. Do these differ at different state levels? Probably, because the states have their own drug laws, and then the national government has their own drug laws too. That's why there are so many states that have marijuana legal, right? But if the national government or the federal government so deemed it so, they could send it to the DEA and arrest those people anyway. But they don't, right? Because it's a states' rights issue. But yes, there are national federal drug laws that are enforced by the DEA, but there are also state laws that are separate. Okay, so usually what we do when we have drugs is we do a screening test first, which is like this color test, right? But then we do a confirmation test, which uses like an instrument, right? So here's another test. This is the test that we can do for cocaine right here, right? We can do two things. We can do either a qualitative test, which is it tells you what the drug is, or then we can do a quantitative test, which tells you how much of the drug is there. Which you know that for trafficking, right? That's important to know how much of the drug is there. And so this is actually, I think this is called the Scott's test right here that we can use to check for cocaine. And so cocaine turns blue under the Scott's test, which you'll do that in lab. And then and so there's a sample, there's a positive control, it's blue, and negative control stays pink. That's the Scott's test. You do that in lab, and you'll see that it happened. It's not real cocaine though, so don't do it. Don't try to smoke it, or whatever they do with cocaine, because I've never done cocaine before. So here's some other tests that you can do too. Some other screening tests you can do. We hate these things right here. Like the police will sometimes have these little packets, right? See here's Scott's test for cocaine right there, right? And they'll use it to test for drugs out in the field. But once they submit it to the crime lab, we get really irritated because these screening tests for colorimetric will mess up the drug, and we can't do our test at the crime lab. So it's a very, very inconvenient thing. But for marquee tests, we'll test for heroin and amphetamines. The daily copium test will do barbiturates. The nucleamine test will do marijuana. But funny thing is that no one uses it anymore. No one uses the nucleamine test anymore. Now what they do is they do this, where they look at the marijuana under the scope. Excuse me. And when they look at the marijuana under the scope, they have these little bear claws, right? And those bear claws are called syphilis hairs. And the syphilis hairs will be a positive screening test for marijuana. So interestingly, marijuana has that, but also oregano has those hairs as well. That's why you'll see oregano under the scope in the lab, and you'll see that it can be positive for I guess there's also the smell. Marijuana is a very distinct smell too. But yeah, that's why I keep on calling it syphilis hairs or bear claws, right? I think these are the ones that are actually from what is it called? Not marijuana, oregano, right? They're pointed upwards, right? Whereas the one for marijuana actually points downwards. It actually looks like a claw. So that's how we can tell the difference between oregano and marijuana. Sometimes they'll do microcrystalline tests, but I've never seen them do that before. Never seen them do a microcrystalline test before. We have a confirmation test. We either use things like the FTIR right here, which is just an instrument that sends light into a molecule. After it sends light, it'll show this like these peaks, and then the peaks will tell you what the molecule is, right? And then we'll also use the GCMS. You shoot the molecule into the GCMS, and then it will also show you peaks, and the peaks will tell you what the molecule is, right? So it's a pretty easy thing to do. There's a library, and you click search library, and they'll search a library for matching peaks, and it's like a molecular fingerprint, and then you can identify what the drug is, right? And they keep on having to update that library because there are always more synthetic opioids and stuff coming out. So this is chromatography, which is not a big thing. We don't do this a lot anymore because mostly we use this guy right here. This is a chromatography right here. And the way Marla likes to describe it is that chromatography is like reverse blending, right? Blenders will mix things together. A chromatography will make things separate, right? And so a mixture of things will go into the GCMS, separate out, and then go into this is the GC part, gas chromatography part, separate out, and then go into the mass spec, and then it will give its peaks, and then that's how I identify what the drug is. But back in the day, though, they used to do this thing where they would put a piece of paper, right, into like a little well or something like that, a little glass container, and then a solvent will go up the paper, and as it does that, it separates molecules out into these little dots, right? So this is called a TLC right here. That stands for thin layer chromatography. Sorry, bad handwriting. But that's thin layer chromatography, and you can see how marijuana or the molecules in marijuana have a very specific like pattern when you separate them up, right? And back in the day, back when it was only one marijuana, right, or not a lot of mixtures or not a lot of different types of synthetic opioids or synthetic cannabinoids, right? Using this would be great, but now there's so many synthetic versions that's very similar that they have to use mass spec, right? They have to use this guy, the GCMS or the gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, because this doesn't do a good enough job separating things out and then identifying it anymore because there's so many synthetic versions of the actual natural drug, right? So most commonly they'll use this, and we have one of these in our lab. We use it all the time. In fact, one of the labs we did in my other class, in advanced instrumental analysis, was detecting cocaine on dollar bills, and one group actually had cocaine on their dollar bill, on their money. Andrea, was that you? Was that your group? Whose group was that had the money, that had the cocaine on it? Of course, I'm calling Andrea just to make sure she's paying attention. Andrea, are you there? Hello.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm trying to.
I knew you weren't paying. I knew you weren't paying attention.
I accidentally locked my iPad instead of turning you up because I couldn't hear you right.
I knew you weren't paying attention.
I'm literally taking notes. But I don't think it was my group that had me and Chris. I don't think we had enough. I think it was Roberto.
Oh, Roberto had the cocaine? Of course he did.
Or was it Michelle? Didn't she say that she was trying to get it from her dad that came from Mexico?
Oh yeah, that's right. It was Michelle.
Yeah.
That's right. It was Michelle. That's right. Terrible. But yeah, so the thing is that I guess the urban myth is that every dollar bill no matter what dollar, whatever denomination, has been in contact with like cocaine. And so if you do analysis on that dollar bill, like using the mass spec, you can detect cocaine on it. If so, one of the groups, I guess it was Michelle's group, in my class last semester, it was a $5 bill, I think it was, that actually had like large amounts of trace cocaine on it. It was kind of crazy. So try it if you want to know. Come, bring me a dollar bill from your wall. We'll see if there's cocaine on it. So here, I guess I could have just gone forward because here's a description of chromatography right here, right? Here's a gas chromatography right here. And the stuff goes in here to get separated, right? And then it goes into the detector, which is a mass spec, and it gives you these peaks. And these peaks tell you, right, whether or not it's a drug or not, right? So here's an unknown mixture, but here's a reference sample, of barbiturates. And you can see how there's this peak right here and this peak right here, matches that peak and that peak. And that's how we know there's some barbiturates in there, right? Phenobarbital, pentobarbital, and cyclobarbital. Fun stuff. It's something we call retention time, is how we identify a drug on the GCMS. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm not going to ask you a lot of questions about it, but just know that the peaks are how you figure it out. And class is almost over, so I'm going to go through this pretty fast. It's actually over, so let me finish this real quick. Spectrometry, right? Again, you just shoot light into a sample, and then it will make these peaks, right? And these peaks will tell you what the molecule is, right? These peaks will tell you the molecule is. If you didn't get the blanks, it will be on the recording, right? Again, spectrometry, you send the light through the molecule, right? And it gives you these peaks, and these peaks will tell you what the molecule is. So here's the IR spectrum here of heroin, IR spectrum of cyclobarbital. Very different. It's like a molecular fingerprint, a library. We have a library of all of these drugs, and it'll search the library to make sure that it's there, okay? It'll search the library to make sure that or to check to see what drug it is. That's what I meant to say. Mass spectrometry, again, these peaks here will tell you, here's a mass spectrum of of heroin. Here's one of cocaine. Different peaks will tell you what the molecule is. And we can actually, again, we have a library of all these different molecules, and then you have an unknown, you send it through the machine, it gives you these peaks, and you just search for the library, and it tells you what it is. We do not have to go into a lot of detail about how it works. It's beyond the scope of the class, but that's but the way it works is this, right? The machine gives you a set of peaks, and then you match it up to something in the library. Let's see here. This is just a big picture of what gas chromatography and mass spectrometry looks like, right? You inject the sample in there. The sample goes into this column here, this little spiral thingy, where it gets separated. And then after it gets separated, it goes into this thing called the mass detector or the mass spec, and it gives you these peaks, right? And the peaks will tell you, after you search the library, it'll tell you what the drug is, right? It gives you a molecular fingerprint. That ends today's lecture. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate your attendance, and we will get together again on Thursday. Make sure you're ready for your presentations that day, okay? See you Thursday. Let's see here. Stop recording. And then how do you stop recording? Stop recording. There it is. Thank you.